Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the National Constitution Center's Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Vince Stango.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Veterans Day. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2018 Liberty Medal ceremony honoring President George W. Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush. As you know, the National Constitution Center inspires citizens as the only place where people across America and around the world can come together to learn about, debate, and celebrate the greatest vision of human freedom in history, the U.S. Constitution. We're honored to educate and inspire so many Americans about the meaning and importance of the U.S. Constitution, and it's because of you that we can engage in this meaningful work. On behalf of Jeff Rosen and the entire team at the National Constitution Center, I want to thank all of you, our donors, partners, and visitors, our public officials, many of whom are in the audience tonight, our Corporate Leadership Council, and our superb Board of Trustees, for everything you do to help us bring the U.S. Constitution to life. I'm sure many of you will want to share our program tonight with your friends and family. When you do so, we invite you to use the hashtag Liberty Medal. However, we ask you to do so quietly, so thank you in advance for silencing your mobile devices now. Now, please join me in welcoming Cynthia McLeod, Superintendent of Independence National Historical Park.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome indeed to the National Constitution Center and to Independence National Historical Park. Congratulations to President George W. Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush for your Liberty Medal Award. The award reflects your significant work with veterans, supporting especially their transition to civilian life. In a country where we have citizen soldiers, the transition from military service back to civilian life is important and not always easy. Thank you, President and Mrs. Bush, for your devotion to veterans. Earlier today, National Park Service staff, rangers, rang the centennial bell atop Independence Hall 21 times as a highlight of programs to honor veterans, especially on this centennial of Armistice Day. They had to climb many stairs and a steep ladder to the open-air tower and tug on a big rope in unison with bells across the nation. The Independence Hall bell rang with others on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in honor of those who served in World War I, and indeed all wars. Today's bell tolling was a solemn nod in a program called Bells of Peace, to mark that 100th anniversary of Armistice Day, the cessation of fighting in 1918 in what was called the Great War to end all wars. Pictures of the streets and newspaper headlines I've seen from November 11th, 1918 show jubilation and celebration at the promise of peace. Indeed, Philadelphia joined other cities again this year in hosting a parade last Sunday, and National Park Rangers have enthralled thousands with special programs this weekend. The World War I Centennial Commission designated our very famous silent bell, the Liberty Bell, as the honorary Bell of Peace to commemorate the centennial of Armistice Day. Although the Liberty Bell cannot literally be rung now, its message of freedom is heard across the nation and around the world. The National Park Service is proud to welcome millions of people every year who visit the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, and the other National Historic Landmarks and museums, including the National Constitution Center, all components of Independence National Historical Park. We share stories of people and events related to these authentic places that comprise the birthplace of our nation, where our founders gathered to create the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, and the national bank and banking system, and our tradition of a peaceful transfer of power from one president elected by the people to the next president. There are fascinating, diverse stories that have everything to do with who we are today. Powerful stories that ignite the national pride and also provoke reflection on what did and did not happen in 1776 and 1787. The stories bring relevancy from our historic foundations to today's world and possibilities. The stories have many connections to veterans in our military. George Washington was made commander-in-chief here. Here is where the U.S. Army was created. Here is the tomb of the unknown soldier from the Revolutionary War. Even today, we continue the tradition of supporting our veterans and the military. I'm proud to serve with many veterans here at the park, and we host numerous military reenlistment, promotion, and retirement ceremonies, including some right in front of the Liberty Bell. Independence National Historical Park is an important, special place. There isn't a better time or place to honor President and Mrs. Bush for their work with veterans than right here at the birthplace of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. There are some friends of the Constitution Center whose dedicated support helps to make nights like tonight possible. I'd like to invite them to join us on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome William R. Sasso, Chairman, Stradley Ronan. Dan Fitzpatrick, President of Citizens Bank Mid-Atlantic Region. Ira Lubert, Chairman, Lubert Adler. This year marks Ira Lubert and Pamela Estat's 10th year sponsoring the $100,000 prize. Please give Ira and Pam an extra round of applause for their incredibly generous support. Dr. Amy Gutman, President of the University of Pennsylvania. Doug DeVos, Chairman of the National Constitution Center's Executive Committee. There's one longtime NCC supporter whose life, legacy, and commitment to constitutional education needs to be acknowledged tonight, Rich DeVos. Rich passed away on September 6th at the age of 92, and all of us at the NCC were saddened by his loss. But more powerful than our sadness was the joy we felt in remembering his life. Thanks to Rich's vision, passion, and generosity, we were able to build this great center and sustain it for the past 15 years, educating millions in Philadelphia and many millions more around the globe. Thank you does not sufficiently capture the sentiments of gratitude that we owe Rich and Helen DeVos and their entire family, but we must thank Rich for what he helped us start almost 20 years ago when he first came to the National Constitution Center as a supporter and later as a trustee. We honor his life by continuing the important work of our congressional charter, playing an important role in sustaining our democracy for generations to come. Please join me in a brief moment of silence as we remember the life well lived of Rich DeVos. Thank you. A few of our special guests this evening recorded messages of support for President and Mrs. Bush. We'd like to share those with you now. Please turn your attention to the screen behind me.
Welcome. I'm Dan Fitzpatrick, and it's my great pleasure to join the National Constitution Center and all of you to celebrate the 2018 recipients of the Liberty Medal, President George Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush. Most of us know how fortunate we are to live under a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We know, too, how many people around the world long for the liberty we enjoy as citizens of a representative democracy. The men and women of the American military do more than protect American freedom. They also represent the hope that freedom will spread to places and people where it is now only an aspiration. The Military Service Initiative is a major pillar of the George W. Bush Presidential Center. Through this initiative, the Bushes honor the liberty that soldiers represent and defend. 2018 proudly marks Citizens Bank's 13th year of supporting the Constitution Center's conveyance of the Liberty Medal. On behalf of our CEO and NCC trustee, Bruce Van Saun, along with all of my colleagues at Citizens Bank, congratulations to President and Mrs. Bush for being the well-deserved recipients of this year's Liberty Medal.
Good evening. I'm Bill Sasso, chairman of the law firm of Stradley Ronan. It's a great honor to join the National Constitution Center in paying tribute to two great Americans, President George Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush. America has a rich military tradition grounded in the preamble to the Constitution. Veterans, current members of the armed forces, and future military leaders chose to put their lives on the line so that we can remain free. Yet too often, the commitment made by these women and men comes at a high cost. They struggle with visible and invisible wounds and the many challenges of returning to civilian life. These challenges affect the lives of our veterans, their families, and their dedicated caregivers. President Bush and Mrs. Bush have committed themselves to those who have sacrificed to provide for the common defense. Today, we honor the two of them for serving those who serve liberty. Thank you for joining me, Stradley Ronan, and the National Constitution Center in congratulating the recipients of the 2018 Liberty Medal, George and Laura Bush.
Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in a few moments. Enjoy.
Good evening and welcome to the National Constitution Center's 2018 Liberty Medal Ceremony. Please welcome Jeffrey Rosen, President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Constitution Center, and Chairman of the National Constitution Center, Vice President Joe Biden, as they escort our 2018 Liberty Medal recipients, President George W. Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush. Please rise for our national anthem and the presentation of colors.
By the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And now, please welcome Jeffrey Rosen, President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Constitution Center.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the National Constitution Center. It is such an honor to welcome you to this great educational institution with an inspiring, nonpartisan mission to increase awareness and understanding of the Constitution among the American people. And it's also an honor on this Veterans Day, the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, for the National Constitution Center to award the 2018 Liberty Medal in recognition of their service to veterans to President George W. Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush. America's veterans inspire us all with the sacrifices they have made to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. America's first and greatest veteran, George Washington, understood the urgent importance of remembering the sacrifices of veterans and promoting civic education. In 1781, he pleaded to his friend, Jonathan Trumbull, on behalf of those veteran troops who, though almost every distress, have been so long and so faithfully serving the states. He added, every satisfaction which can reasonably be requested should be given to them. Washington was similarly passionate about civic education. In urging Congress in 1796 to create a national university, Washington said a primary object of such a national institution should be education of our youth in the science of government. Recent studies confirm Washington's insight that civic education in the structures of government is necessary to preserve the future of the American Republic. Citizens, both liberal and conservative, who are educated about the importance of an independent judiciary and judicial review are more likely to support democratic norms and values. And at a time when the percentage of people who say it is essential to live in a democracy is plummeting around the globe, a time when support for autocratic alternatives to the American Constitution is alarmingly high among young people, civic education, it's now clear, is crucial to the survival of liberty and democracy in America. Last week, Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Justice Neil Gorsuch sat down together for an interview to discuss the critical need for civic education in America. Friends, I'm thrilled to share that Justice Gorsuch, along with Elena Kagan and other justices, are participating in a series of educational videos about the Constitution that the National Constitution Center is creating now. These videos will appear on the Constitution Center's Interactive Constitution, an amazing online learning platform which has received more than 20 million hits since it launched in 2015. I want you to download this app now and look at it on the web. This remarkable platform for constitutional light brings together the top liberal and conservative scholars to debate every clause of the Constitution, describing what they agree about and what they disagree about. And I'm also thrilled to share an exciting collaboration between the Constitution Center and the College Board, which administers the SAT and the advanced placement exams. Recognizing the crucial importance of teaching civics to high school students, the College Board will encourage all 3 to 5 million AP students to take a 2-week course on the First Amendment, which the National Constitution Center is creating. But it gets even better. That's not all. This 2-week First Amendment course is going to be available not just to advanced placement U.S. government and history students, but to all students, whether they're studying physics or chemistry or Italian or French. At the end of their courses, they'll have the opportunity to learn the basic principles of the First Amendment before they graduate from high school. And in our next incarnation, we're going to take not only the First Amendment, but the principles of the structural Constitution to work together to bring the interactive Constitution not just to AP high school students, but to middle and high school students across America. And in the process of studying the Constitution, students will learn to debate and protest respectfully and civilly with full respect for our First Amendment values. Our common task today, friends, is to honor America's veterans, who can teach us better than anyone about the sacrifices required to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. All of us have veterans who have touched our lives, and I just want to give a special call out to my dear dad. He's 92, he served in the Korean War, and I have his dog tag in my pocket right now. In that spirit, we're gathered to honor President and Mrs. Bush, who have devoted their time and talent since leaving office to listening to veterans, to honoring their stories, and to working to ease their transition to civilian life. After leaving office, President Bush said he would dedicate the rest of his life to serving veterans, and so he has, and we honor you for that service. And anyone who has heard Mrs. Bush talk about the importance of adult literacy and honoring veterans cannot fail to be inspired, and we are so honored that she, too, has devoted her energy to inspiring veterans and all Americans to become better and deeper readers. Thank you for that great service. The Bushes have decided to honor veterans by donating today's Liberty Medal Prize to A Charge to Keep, which is the campaign to endow the work of the George W. Bush Institute and its military service initiative. Together, President and Mrs. Bush inspire all of us to live up to the shining example of America's veterans, who remind us how important it is that all of us educate ourselves about the greatest document of human freedom in history, the U.S. Constitution. Thank you so much.
Please welcome University of Pennsylvania President, Dr. Amy Gutman.
Here on Veterans Day, on behalf of the Liberty Medal Committee, which I have the honor of chairing, I extend our utmost respect and reverence to the women and men who don the uniforms of our nation's military. To them, we all say, we will never forget your service. Your personal valor, your sacrifice merit our nation's highest regard and most devoted service. Today, we recognize two individuals who have dedicated themselves to just such service, answering the needs of our veterans and inspiring us all to join their effort. George W. Bush vowed after his presidency to spend the rest of his life helping our vets. Across all his efforts, Laura Bush has joined, stood resolutely, strongly at his side, championing education for our vets and our support for them. Together, they have worked tirelessly to unite communities, nonprofit organizations, businesses, academia, and philanthropy in support of our nation's wonderful veterans. The University of Pennsylvania, which I lead, has a deep and abiding connection with our nation's military, and we're so proud of it. Penn has taught many famous military leaders as well, including Major Samuel Nicholas, the first Commandant of the Marine Corps, and Benjamin Stoddard, the first Secretary of the Navy. To every individual service member, we honor and we salute their sacrifices. They give their all in our defense. In grateful appreciation, President and Mrs. Bush have given their all in return. They have paid it forward. They have modeled what gratitude, service, and leadership mean. To them, we are so grateful. You see it in the many sponsored activities that bring them together with our post-9/11 wounded warriors. Whether it's leading a 100-kilometer bicycle ride, traveling to promote employment opportunities for veterans, or meeting one-on-one with vets and listening to their inspiring stories of service. Most evocatively, you see it in the paintings that President Bush has created of 98 former members of the armed services, most of whom served in Iraq and Afghanistan. These paintings are gathered together in his eye-riveting and heart-wrenching book, Portraits of Courage. And portraits of courage they are. The faces of our vets tell the story of war and its aftermath. They also tell the story of this president's and painter's love, respect, and admiration for each and every one of these great individuals. The connection is real, it is deep, it is visceral. At the George W. Bush Presidential Center in Dallas, the steadfast commitment of President and Mrs. Bush to the health, safety, and success of our nation's veterans is manifest throughout the Bush Institute Military Service Initiative, which helps military service members to continue their exemplary leadership as citizens. When George Washington took the unprecedented and to many unimaginable step of freely relinquishing power after 2 terms of office, he wrote a public letter to his fellow citizens. He concluded with a wish for peace, saying he looked forward most of all, and I quote, to the sweet enjoyment of the benign influence of good laws under a free government. No nation remains free without men and women who, in our hour of need, rise willingly to its defense. And no nation can long be considered good or benign that does not care for those who so freely and devotedly come to our aid. President George W. Bush and Laura Bush remind us in their words, in their deeds, in their hearts, and most of all, in their unfailing support for America's veterans, that ours is a nation devoted to liberty and justice for all. Theirs is a clarion call that we do right by those who have done so right by us and for us. It is for that dedication that the Liberty Medal Committee unanimously and enthusiastically selected President and Mrs. Bush for this single honor. On behalf of the committee, on behalf of us all, I offer my heartfelt congratulations to you both, and most of all, our deep-felt gratitude. Thank you very, very much.
Please welcome to the stage Sergeant First Class Michael Rodriguez, United States Army retired, and Leslie Zimmerman, veteran, United States Army.
At age 18, I enlisted as a combat medic in the Army, inspired by my sister who was in the Marine Corps. I loved the teamwork, the camaraderie, and the purpose that my military family gave me. But above all, I loved serving my country. After witnessing the brutality of war, I had many unwanted memories that remain with me. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and depression. Determined to heal on my own, I pushed away my family and friends. While trying to cope. Recognizing my determination had become a weakness, I sought help. I gave myself permission to feel with the fight from within and to not feel alone. With humble courage, I hope to help others find their road to recovery.
My first heroes were my grandfathers who served during World War II and my father who fought in Vietnam. I joined the Army at age 17, and after 21 years of service, I retired as a Special Forces Green Beret. My wife retired last year after 21 years in the Army, and my eldest son is an airborne infantryman in the 82nd Airborne Division who just returned home from his first deployment to Afghanistan, marking the 16th deployment for my household alone. Even though I no longer wear the uniform, I continue to fight the invisible wounds of war and the forms of post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. I am not a threat. I'm engaged in a fight I'm not ashamed of, and it's a fight I'm not necessarily trained for, but it's a war I eagerly face because I know I will win, so I'm not fighting this war alone.
Rod and I both have benefited from the Bush Institute's Military Service Initiative. We've used sports, particularly mountain biking, to find a renewed sense of purpose, strength, and healing. We both have had the honor of riding with President Bush several times during the W100 bike ride that President and Mrs. Bush host on their ranch. The teamwork and the support we find in sports has given us a new identity and a new mission to help ourselves and our fellow veterans in their path to recovery. recovery from the invisible and the visible wounds of war.
As members of Team 43, I stand side by side with my brothers and sisters who are committed to selfless service. The Bush Institute's Military Service Initiative is empowering us and other post-9/11 veterans and their families through their programs and engagement. When I hear that only 1% of our population wears our nation's uniform, I am filled with pride. I am proud that it only takes 1% to defend the 99%. Each of us has been challenged by President Bush to continue our servant leadership after we take the uniform off, highlighting to the rest of the nation, we, as a veteran community, are an asset, and we will continue to serve others first.
In a moment, you'll hear from a few more of our fellow Team 43 members about their own experiences. And while our stories are different, there's one thing that we all have in common.
We are proud of our service to this nation. President Bush has said his greatest honor was saluting us as Commander-in-Chief. And I think Leslie and I would say our greatest honor has been not only defending this great country, but calling President and Mrs. Bush our friends. I want to thank you all for coming here to celebrate their servant leadership.
Thank you all for being here tonight.
I was shot in the head by a sniper on October 18, 2006. It hit me behind my left ear and exploded out of my mouth.
I ended up getting shot 4 times in a firefight. I was 35 years old, young Special Forces captain, 8 and 11-year-old kids, great marriage, and then in that second, life changed, and I didn't know if I'd ever walk.
The Marines on the ground yelled blue on blue, friendly fire. The moment that I heard that, my heart sank immediately. I knew that I was responsible for wounding a fellow Marine, but I felt a lot of guilt and shame, and I had a very hard time pulling the trigger in any instance afterward.
Marine Corporal David Smith was honorably discharged and went to college on the GI Bill, but was haunted by the invisible wounds of war.
I tried to bury it in alcohol, and I felt like if I had no feeling in life, and if I had pushed away all of my friends and family, then what was the point in continuing on? So I took a loaded shotgun and I put it in my mouth.
At that moment, he thought of a friend who'd committed suicide a year earlier.
I remembered the effect that it had on his friends and family, and I vividly remembered how much I cried during his funeral.
So Smith put down the gun, went into counseling, and just 1 month later, he joined President Bush and dozens of other wounded warriors for a 3-day mountain bike ride known as the W100K.
It was really cool. You're riding mountain bikes with a former president of the United States. You're meeting new people, you're sharing wartime experiences, and there's so much healing that's taking place at the same time.
I've had a chance to ride twice with President Bush.
Lieutenant Colonel Kent Solheim had been a competitive cyclist and a runner in his younger years, and sports became a critical part of his recovery.
To figure out who I was, what was I capable of doing, and that just really, I think, to prove to myself that you still are the core person that you were.
The Bush Institute also hosts an annual golf tournament known as the Warrior Open.
That's when I first met President Bush and Laura Bush.
And it was on the green that Lieutenant Colonel Justin Constantine found his peace.
Just being out there in nature, not having to address the issue of what I look like, just worrying about that super little ball and getting in the hole. And you know, once in a while you make a birdie and it makes it all worthwhile.
The adaptive sports programs are dubbed Team 43.
They're not just events, these are reunions.
It's changed lives in a very positive way.
But it allows them to understand that even with some physical inabilities, they are capable of living full, enriching lives.
The Bush Institute's Military Service Initiative also has an economic opportunity program
that's really focused on employment and education opportunities.
They can apply some of that meaning, purpose, belonging, community, and mission that they had in the military to their civilian life.
And a Warrior Wellness Alliance.
And that is really laser focused on the invisible wounds of war.
It is called PTSD, but we just call it post-traumatic stress. Drop the D because disorder makes it sound like there's something wrong with them.
We've combined best-in-class care providers, but most importantly, some of the more popular post-9/11 peer-to-peer organizations today to help influence them towards seeking care.
If you can make the invisible visible, and if you're willing to talk with other people about it, and you can overcome it.
The program puts a strong focus on veteran caregivers, the often unsung heroes.
My wife gets the call. She's told to pack her bags to go to Walter Reed for an indefinite period of time. For 42 days, she stayed in my room.
Dahlia's my wife, and she was the cornerstone of my recovery. I was on a feeding tube, I was in a wheelchair, I needed help with everything.
There are 5.5 million spouses, siblings, parents, and friends caring for wounded warriors at home.
They have served and continue to serve this nation as well as anybody who's ever worn a uniform.
Mrs. Bush listened to their pains, their frustrations, their needs, and then she's translated those through the Bush Institute into action.
The Institute also offers leadership training.
President and Mrs. Bush recognized that when these men and women take off the uniform, the real opportunity is for them to come home and to lead our businesses and our communities.
They come from the military, where leadership is not just a word. Leadership is a values-based principle.
Mary Beth Brueggemann was a combat engineer in the Marines.
I made the decision to leave active duty shortly after my first daughter was born. I immediately felt that vacuum of sense of purpose.
She's now part of the Bush Institute's inaugural Stand 2 Veteran Leadership class.
The whole premise of the Stand 2 initiative is to challenge corporate leaders, congressional leaders, entrepreneurs to do their part.
Rather than thanking them for their service, it's more about thanking them for continuing to serve and finding additional ways for them to continue serving.
Brueggemann is a vice president at the Mission Continues, a nonprofit that puts veterans to work in underserved communities.
This concept that when you leave the military, in fact, your service is not done. There are front lines here at home as well.
The Bushes have focused specifically on post-9/11 veterans. President Bush features nearly 100 of them in his best-selling book, Portraits of Courage.
Each one of the portraits recognizes that the country has been defended by incredible individuals.
I just saw a guy 2 weeks ago actually at the gym, and he said, read about you in the book, really inspirational, thanks for what you're doing.
Justin Constantine is now a motivational speaker and author.
But take it from me, life is beautiful and precious. Like many other wounded warriors, I'm really lucky to be here. I don't want to waste a minute of my time.
Kent Solheim deployed 2 more times after losing his leg.
It was a strong desire to get back.
He and his wife started a nonprofit called Gold Star Teen Adventures to serve the children of Special Forces members who did not make it home.
We run an adventure-based program, link them up with strong mentors.
Dave Smith is now the chief marketing officer of a Norwegian tech company. The warrior who was so wounded he was afraid to feel anything married his college sweetheart last summer.
I'm sorry I can't be there, but Norway sure is a long way from Crawford.
The couple just welcomed their first child.
I've never been happier than I am today. I can say that without a doubt.
His story is one of those stories that shows the importance of what this is all about. The reason he's here in large part is because of this.
President and Mrs. Bush are committed for the rest of their life to this work.
The Bush Center, the staff, makes us feel that we're not forgotten when we return home.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice President Joe Biden.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. It's an honor to be here. My name is Joe Biden. I work for President Bush. It's not part of the script, but let me just say one brief introductory comment. I carry in my pocket my schedule every day like all of you do. And Mr. President, every morning at 7 o'clock, I have my staff contact the Defense Department, because I want to know exactly how many men and women have been killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Not generically, exactly. Every single one of them leaves behind a whole community. Nothing angers me more, it's unfair of me, I know, when they say, well, roughly 6,800 killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's 6,842. There are 52,732, not 31, wounded. But you just saw the speakers and on television the incredible work that Mrs. Bush and President Bush are doing for these wounded warriors. There are estimated 300,000 coming home with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. And they're always trained never to complain. My dad's expression, never complain and never explain. And they're trained not to ask for help. And so what our two speakers did earlier tonight, and all those who spoke, give people courage to come forward. Give people courage to come forward and seek the help they need. More people are dying in the military as a consequence of suicide than they are of anything else right now. So I can't tell you, Mr. President and Laura, how touched I was by, I know of the program, but seeing it and see your deep involvement in it, it really, really matters. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 2 years since President Obama and I left office, I've had the opportunity to take on a few new projects, including a professorship at the University of Pennsylvania, the Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, thanks to President Gutmann, and the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware, working on domestic policy. But the biggest honor has been serving as chairman of the board of the National Constitution Center. This is an institution dedicated to preserving the fundamentals of our democracy and educating the next generation about the uniqueness and the audacity of our founding document. Folks, unlike any other country in the world, America is unique. Now, that's not chauvinism. It's a historical statement of fact. We are uniquely a product of our political institutions, unlike any other country in the world. We're not organized based on ethnicity, race, religion, tribe. We're organized around a set of ideals and values to which you must be committed to say you're an American. Enshrined in our Constitution. For 230 years, our Constitution has endured, guiding us through our many stumbles and shortcomings as a nation, while overseeing the inexorable march toward freedom and liberty. It's a document that makes no mention of political party or faction. Only we the people hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal. We say it all the time. We learn it when we're in school. But it really is who we are. We haven't always lived up to it, but we've never walked away from it. And so, folks, in the week following another contentious political season, the presentation of the Liberty Medal is a critical reminder that neither Republicans nor Democrats hold a monopoly on the values and ideals that define us as a nation. So I'm proud to be here tonight to honor President George W. Bush and the former First Lady Laura Bush, who celebrate the values we share as Americans. It's no secret President Bush and I occasionally had our political disagreements. I remember one time in the Oval Office, Mr. President, you looking at me and saying, "Damn, Biden, you spent more time in this office than me than anybody else, including Republicans." But the fact of the matter is, I always respected the president. We had a disagreement on a number of issues which we made pretty clear to one another in private. And we were never hesitant to tell each other the honest-to-God truth as we saw it. But that's the way the system is supposed to work. Voices raised in a contest of ideas to determine the direction we take as a nation. As President Bush was my opposition as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, he was never my enemy. Think how demeaning our politics has become in terms of how we talk about one another. There's the opposition, not enemies. You know, and where our priorities aligned, we work together. I think there's no better example of that, Mr. President, than the incredible legacy you left in the President's emergency plan for AIDS relief called PEPFAR. In the 90s and early 2000s, the AIDS epidemic in Africa was threatening to wipe out an entire generation of leadership, as well as an entire generation. But President Bush, you believed, with American leadership, we could turn that tide. So you put real political muscle and resources into making sure PEPFAR would be effective. And I was proud to play a small role as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee to twice see it authorized and make sure it was funded. Today, there are 14 million people receiving life-saving HIV treatment who otherwise would not have received it, would not receive the care because of PEPFAR, because of you. And we continue to work toward a world free of the specter of AIDS. PEPFAR is an incredible vision, and it continues to be an incredible demonstration of American values and America's capacity to do big things. I said at the time, and I'll reiterate it today, history will record as one of your greatest achievements, Mr. President, you've had many, that PEPFAR was one of them. Now that we're both out of office and continuing our public service through new avenues, we once again find ourselves on the same side of an important fight. This year, the Penn Biden Center of Diplomacy Engagement joined the George W. Bush Institute and Freedom House to undertake a study on, it's called the Democracy Project, a national and international survey to gauge attitudes, American attitudes, about the core democratic principles and how we can strengthen and support democracies around the world, because they are under siege in many parts of the world today. President Bush and Laura, we share a belief that those values which undergird our democracy are precious, and they exist way above party, and they have to be defended. That's the duty of patriots. That's the duty of patriots. And as a team, Laura, you and the President continue to take on big challenges in your post-White House years through your work at the George W. Bush Institute. And tonight we recognize the impact you've made through your enduring commitment to supporting America's veterans and caregivers. And if my mother were here, looking at you, being married as long as you have, she'd say, no purgatory for you, dear, straight to heaven. Straight to heaven. Because you understand the sacrifice we ask of our men and women who wear the uniform of the United States and the toll that it takes on both the service members and their families. I've long said that we have many, many obligations as a country. But we only have, in my view, and I get criticized for saying it, but I'll say it again, we only have one sacred obligation, one truly sacred obligation, to properly equip those we send to war and care for them and their families, both while they're deployed and when they return. And it's not as easy as just picking up where you left off. That's why you created the Veterans Employment Transition Roadmap, a customized toolkit to help service members smooth the return back to civilian life and find good jobs. And that's why you've made it a point to not just focus on mending physical wounds, but dealing with the unseen scars. Jill and I just worked with the Walking Wounded who walked across the United States 1,000 miles, Brits and Americans hand in hand, doing the same thing, trying to raise the level of awareness among veterans that it's okay, it's necessary, it's good to seek help. There is no stigma. Promoting awareness about mental health issues for servicemen and veterans and their families is one of the core issues my wife Jill and I focus on at the Biden Foundation. So I want to applaud everything you've done, both of you, to care, connect, and care connect providers for the veterans who need help through the Warrior Wellness Alliance, ensuring our heroes and their families can reach out and get help, and it's there when they reach out for it. We have to eliminate the barriers that keep people from seeking and receiving the support they need in mental health. There's no difference between a mental health problem and a broken bone. It's a problem. It's a health problem. And as the Bushes know, it's about literally changing our culture. Our veterans and their family are so used to being strong, they have to know it's okay to ask for help. They have to know that when they ask for help, they'll be connected to the care and support they so badly needed. The Bush Institute Military Service Initiative has been a leader on these issues for many years, including a critical partner, the Joining Forces Initiative, which Jill, my wife, and the First Lady Michelle Obama started during our administration. And I know that you both feel this responsibility and this mission personally. It's a personal commitment you have. Mr. President, I've always been impressed by your ability to connect with people. And I deeply respect your commitment to Team 43, forming these personal relationships with our wounded warriors through sports and honoring their individual stories with the art of portraits of courage. It's incredibly personal to the Biden family as well. We learned that, what it means to be a military family when our son Bo was deployed to Iraq for a year. Came back a decorated soldier after a year, but his main concern, his plea to his mother, was as long as you're involved, please get involved in working on mental health problems for returning veterans. You know, we saw how difficult his absence was for his two young children. We prayed daily for his safety and those of his comrades. Every family member knows what it means to sacrifice. You know, the poet Keats said that, talking about service of family, said, they also serve who only stand and wait. They also serve who only stand and wait. And for every deployed soldier and everyone that was deployed and deployed now, there's someone standing and waiting and praying. It's not about, again, Democrats or Republicans. It's about who we are. It's about standing up for men and women who put their lives on the line to defend us every single day. It's about fighting for the soul of this nation that has given us so much. So thank you both, President Bush and Mrs. Bush, for your ongoing commitment to honor and support the brave men and women who serve in the United States military, who is, without fear of contradiction, the finest fighting force in the history of the world. That is not hyperbole. It's the finest fighting force in the world. And for all your efforts on their behalf. Now, I'm about to say the medal you're going to be presented, but I want to tell you, Mr. President, my wife Jill, who could not be with us tonight, wanted me to simultaneously present you both with a Philadelphia Eagles jersey tonight. President Bush asked me about the game night. He said, Joe, are you an Eagles fan? I said, yes, unless I want to sleep alone. I married a Phillies girl. I married a Philly girl. Mr. President, on a very serious note, it's my honor to present you both with the National Constitution Center 2016 Liberty Medal. You both deserve it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bestow the 2018 Liberty Medal. And I now invite Vice President Biden and Doug DeVos, Chair of the National Constitution Center, to join me in the presentation. President George W. Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush, for supporting America's veterans and the sacrifices they have made to provide for the common defense and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, for honoring that sacrifice and service by helping America's veterans in their transition to civilian life despite the visible and invisible wounds of war, for your work with Gold Star families and others who care for those who defend our freedom, and for inspiring all Americans to educate themselves about the principles of freedom and preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. It is the National Constitution Center's honor to award you the 2018 Liberty Medal. And it's now my honor to invite to the podium the first of our 2018 Liberty Medal winners, Mrs. Laura Bush.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, and thank you, Vice President Biden, and thank you very much, Doug DeVos. Thank you all for this honor. And thank you for hosting George and me at the National Constitution Center today. Thanks to Rod Rodriguez and to Leslie Zimmerman and to all the veterans and active military here today. Thank you for your distinguished service to our country. President Bush and I are retired now, so we want to spend our afterlife dedicated to the programs of the George W. Bush Institute, including and especially our Military Service Initiative. The Military Service Initiative honors the men and women who've served our country. We're working with them to develop the leadership skills and the tools they need to transition successfully to civilian life. Since 2011, President Bush has hosted veterans at the Warrior Open Golf Tournament in Dallas and the Warrior 100K bike ride at our ranch in Crawford. At these events, George and I are inspired by the strength and the determination of our veterans. While George is watching chips and putts or riding with the Warriors, I like to spend time with the spouses and caregivers who accompany their warriors to Texas. These are the ones who care for the family and manage the home while our servicemen and women are deployed. They help their kids with the homework. They oversee the family finances, and they pray that their husbands or wives in uniform return home safely. Master Sergeant Rocky Arena and his wife Marlene joined us at our ranch in 2017 for the Warrior 100 bike ride. When Marlene talked about Rocky's years of service in the Air Force, she said, "I say we served for 25 years. I lived every deployment with Rocky, every trial and tribulation, so that the day I said yes to him, I didn't realize the impact that his service was going to have on me." This is the reason it's so important to make sure that while our servicemen and women receive the support they need when they come home, that we care for their spouses and families too. November is National Family Caregivers Month. So today, on Veterans Day, we must consider how we can help the caregivers now and in the future. There are over 4 million post-9/11 veterans and more than 1 million men and women who are caring for these post-9/11 veterans. And of course, all any caregiver wants is for his or her family to be in good physical and mental health. As veterans transition to civilian life, visible wounds, post-traumatic stress, and lack of stability may make veterans more susceptible to issues like depression and addiction. And of course, when one family member suffers, the entire family suffers, leading to an increase in the risk of behavioral issues and anxiety and depression in military children. Just as veterans need good health care when they return home, caregivers need access to quality care for themselves and for their children. 15% of military caregivers spend 40 hours a week caring for their veteran, and they often spend more hours caring for their children when child care is unavailable. As a result of caregiving, 48% of post-9/11 caregivers have been forced to take unpaid time off from work, and 28% have had to quit working entirely. With these statistics, it's not surprising that many caregivers report that caregiving has caused financial strain. Anne Marie Craig joined us at the Bush Institute last month for our Stand To Veteran Leadership Program. Anne Marie is a military caregiver and one of 33 scholars in our inaugural Stand To Veteran Leadership class. Anne Marie's husband is an Army Special Operations Forces veteran, and they have 3 children. For many years, Anne Marie worked for the Department of Defense and Intelligence community, but as she watched service members, including her husband, return home, she was inspired to do more. In 2012, she co-founded the Commit Foundation to help veterans translate their skills into successful roles and careers for their service. Anne Marie said, "This work has been my passion, and it's the product of my family's journey with traumatic brain injury. I navigated services as I worked to heal my husband and the many others I met along the way." During a conversation about caregivers last month, she told the Stand To class, "There's a group of us that shows up instead of walking out, that builds rather than tears down, and that waters the plants and tends the garden. Our military spouses and caregivers do just that. They tend the gardens at home, creating and maintaining a nurturing place to take care of their loved ones. They have the same priorities as the rest of us, and they have them with more difficulties and obstacles. It reminds me of the old line, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but she did it backwards and in high heels." So to all of the government programs, corporate and nonprofit communities and individuals working to improve veteran transition, I ask that you consider how you can support the hidden heroes and the loved ones who also serve our country. George and I are forever thankful for the brave men and women who volunteer to defend our country. Our military strength is the strength of our nation. Our service members are the strength of our military, and our caregivers are the strength of our veterans and wounded warriors. Their devotion to our men and women in uniform and their commitment to their marriage, their family, and to our country is an inspiration to us all. Now I'd like to introduce the former Commander-in-Chief, my husband, President George W. Bush.
Thank you all. Thank you. Sit down. Thank you all. Thank you, Laura. Laura was a fabulous First Lady. I one time said that and the crowd went wild, then I realized my mother was sitting on the front row. She's also a fabulous advocate for our military spouses and caregivers. Mr. Vice President, it's great to be in your presence. Doug DeVos, Jeff Rosen, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I am incredibly proud, along with Laura, to receive the Liberty Medal. And I thank the National Constitution Center and the members of its board for this high honor. Laura and I are the second and third members of our family to have received this award. The most deserving, of course, was the first. And I'm proud to follow in my dad's footsteps once again. In case you're wondering, he's doing all right these days, and he sends his greetings. He is 94 years old, and his parachuting adventures are now officially behind him. At least that's what we keep telling him. Both my dad and my brother Jeb once served as the chairman of the National Constitution Center, a position that is now held by Vice President Biden. Joe, you're looking good. Yeah, it's amazing what happens when you get out of office. I really appreciate your good spirit in presenting this award. I thank you for your public service, and I wish you all the very best. Joe and I, share a love of liberty. To that end, as Joe mentioned, the Bush Institute is partnering with the Penn Biden Center and the Freedom House on a project to reaffirm support for democracy, both at home and abroad. We aim to inspire men and women in the darkest corners of the world and instruct a rising generation on the beauty and the possibility of free societies. When the Vice President was here last year to bestow this same award, the recipient was a man who dedicated his life to the cause of liberty, a man we admire and miss. And who better to keep close in memory on Veterans Day than our friend John McCain. John's passing this summer was an occasion to recall the kind of bravery and fortitude we have always counted on in the armed services of the United States. This is a man who had been to the darkest places as a prisoner of war. He returned as a witness to the unbreakable bonds of loyalty and comradeship amongst those who sacrificed for our country. As for the privilege of serving, John said on this stage last year he was repaid 1,000 times over. It was sure a modest way of looking at it. But that's how it is with so many men and women who have worn the uniform. And often the humility runs deepest in the ones who gave the most. I've been fortunate to meet thousands of these patriots. And what most of them want to tell me is this: they were proud to serve, and they'd do it again. Veterans Day is the appropriate time to honor them. 1918, on the 11th day of the 11th month, an armistice ended the Great War. News of a quiet Western Front prompted celebrations all around the world on this very day 100 years ago. It was a moment of hope that the light of liberty could never be extinguished. Every November 11th since, we've shown our appreciation to all those who've stepped forward to take an oath, to live by a code of conduct, and accept the discipline of military life, a discipline that brought out the best and that which was in them. We recall what it means to put country above self, ready if the orders to come to face war and everything that goes with it. We think of all the American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who never lived to be called veterans, and the warfighters who came home to face new struggles as wounded veterans. By far the gravest responsibility any president has is to be a commander-in-chief, leading the most formidable, courageous, selfless collection of men and women you will find anywhere. And in the near decade since Laura and I left the White House, we've had the further honor of knowing so many veterans as friends, especially those who served or enlisted after September the 11th, 2001. The Bush Institute on the campus of Southern Methodist University in Dallas, we're helping warriors and their families keep moving forward in life. The transition can be extremely tough for our vets. Some come home with visible and invisible wounds of war. Others feel disconnected from their communities or miss the sense of purpose they found in their military career. We are helping them with health care, career opportunities, and the fellowship of other veterans. These men and women are tremendous national assets, and they have so much more to give to our country. With us tonight are members of the Bush Institute's Warrior Wellness Alliance. It's a project we started to get more warriors the quality, personalized care they need and deserve for invisible wounds of war like post-traumatic stress, and traumatic brain injury. Laura and I joined some of these partners at Point Breeze neighborhood earlier today for a service project where we planted trees in a public park. Travis Manion Foundation was there. The mission continues. Team Rubicon, Team Red, White, and Blue. It is always a joy to be with our veterans and to see them helping each other as they help the communities in which they live. As you've heard, not only do we produce programs, but we host the Warrior Open Golf Tournament and the W100K mountain bike ride. These outings underscore the importance of sports as a rehabilitation component for some vets, and they offer a support network for continued recovery. The inspiration they provide for each other and for those of us there is far greater than anything we could offer them. I aim to keep doing it. I aim to keep riding mountain bikes until my bike breaks down or my body. I count these friendships among the great blessings of my life. And I have painted quite a few of them. You may have heard that I took up painting a while back. And I'm pleased to say that some of my paintings are on public display. If you happen to go to an art museum where they are, just look for the sign that says Gallery of the Masters and go the other way. The good news is even my toughest critic says I'm kind of improving. You know, I think the turning point may have been when I began the paintings for my book, Portraits of Courage. The participants of our mountain bike rides and golf tournaments have formed a group known as Team 43. And I wanted to capture at least something of their resilience and greatness of heart on canvas. I painted 98 of these remarkable men and women and recorded their stories. You've heard from two of my subjects tonight, Leslie Zimmerman and Michael Rodriguez. I call him Rod. When I painted Leslie, I painted a compassionate woman who saw firsthand the horrors of war as a combat medic. I painted a fierce competitor on the mountain bike, which she has used to overcome the invisible wounds of war. I painted a veteran who has become a dedicated wife and mother, a selfless soul who's determined to help others. And I painted a friend. In capturing Rod, I wondered, how does an artist show the character of a courageous Green Beret who saw tough combat against terrorists, sustained repeated injuries, and worried only about missing the next deployment? A husband who struggled with post-traumatic stress as he helped his wonderful wife, also a veteran, deal with hers. A father whose son, born just a few years before 9/11, became the 5th generation of the Rodriguez family to serve in the military. Rod mentioned his son, Antonio, and the fact that his platoon, the mighty Taco Vipers, has just returned from Afghanistan, and we salute him, Rod. I'll leave it for better judges to decide how close my portraits came to the mark. I can assure you only that they were put on canvas with my utmost respect and care. And the message isn't just how honorable and heroic these men and women were in the past. It is that this new generation of veterans has the gifts to shine in whatever they do. They number in the hundreds of thousands, and no group of citizens is more vital to the future success of our country. Come to think of it, that's always been true of veterans, ever since a former Army general presided over the Constitutional Convention. There's no steadier influence in the life of our nation than the ones who have defended America and understand what it takes. What would the influence of America itself be today without the legacy of our veterans? We rightly speak of our nation as a force like no other in history, with liberating armies, moral commitments, and alliances to safeguard peaceful nations from every kind of enemy. Generations of statesmen and diplomats have done their part. Yet for our peaceful purposes in the world, nothing has ever mattered more than the skill and the courage and the sheer decency of those who've served in the United States military. For my part, to return the salute of such people was the highest of all the privileges that came with the office of President. And because the Liberty Medal is presented to Laura and me on Veterans Day, we will cherish it all the more. To us, it will always be a reminder of the people we deeply admire, including some very special men and women we know and love. I want to thank you very much. May God bless our veterans, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you for attending the National Constitution Center's 2018 Liberty Medal Ceremony.